If you were to make a list of the Bible's greatest heroes, who would you include? For many, Moses would top the list, with the book of Exodus as his origin story. Moses, however, would be the first person to correct this view. Every book of the Bible has only one hero, God, whose name is written in Hebrew as Yahweh. And each book is primarily interested in revealing His character to a world enslaved to sin, in desperate need of His deliverance. The book of Exodus is no exception. It is the second of 5 books that the earliest Jewish and Christian traditions attribute to Moses. In this book, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, mockingly asks, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him?" The stories of Exodus are Moses' answer. He wrote first for the Israelites who had been freed from slavery in Egypt and their descendants. In Exodus, Moses continues what he began in the book of Genesis. He teaches these former slaves about the character of Yahweh, the God of Abraham who had delivered them. He shows them why obedience to God's covenant was their appropriate response. Yet, Moses also wrote with all future Israelite generations in mind. He knew that they would need to place themselves within this foundational story of redemption. Only then could each new generation fully participate in the covenant God had established with their ancestors. Exodus picks up the story of Abraham's family where Genesis left off, with the children of Israel in Egypt. There, the Hebrews were exceedingly fruitful and multiplied greatly. But the Egyptian king felt threatened by their growing numbers and oppressed the Israelites with forced labor. But this is exactly what God had told Abraham would happen generations earlier. However, at the same time, God also promised that He would bring judgment on the nation that they served, free Abraham's family, and lead them back to Canaan, their promised land. In Exodus, God fulfills this promise by sending Moses to Pharaoh as his official representative. His staff symbolized God's own arm, outstretched in judgment over Egypt and its gods. Pharaoh himself was known in Egypt as the son of Ra, the sun god. He was viewed as the one responsible for maintaining the proper cycles of the Nile, crops, and the sun. When Moses delivers the Lord's command to "let my people go," Pharaoh sneers back, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him?" God answers through the plagues. Through them, Yahweh dismantles the Egyptian illusion that Pharaoh controls the forces of nature and proves that there is no one like Yahweh in all the earth. Only after he is humbled does Pharaoh finally allow the Israelites to leave Egypt to serve the Lord. Every year thereafter, the Israelites commemorated this deliverance through the Passover festival. Every spring they cleared their houses of leaven and ate roasted lamb with bitter herbs to remember their hasty flight and God's liberation of them from bondage. After God led their ancestors into freedom, each generation of Israelites would recall how Moses brought the people to Mount Sinai. There, God appeared before them and gave them the commandments that instructed them how to live as His covenant people. They would tell their children how God had descended on the mountain in dense smoke and fire to bind Israel to Himself through an ancient ritual. The covenant ritual was typically performed between 2 kingdoms, one greater and one lesser. In these ceremonies, the lesser kingdom promised exclusive loyalty and obedience to the superior king in exchange for his blessing and protection. In the covenant made at Sinai, Yahweh took the position of the superior king. Israel, however, owed allegiance to Yahweh not because He was a powerful tyrant who had conquered them, but because He was a benevolent Savior who had delivered them. When children would later ask, "Who is the Lord that we should obey Him?" the answer would be passed down through the generations. He is the God who brought us out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. After hearing the 10 Commandments, the terms of the covenant, for the first time, the people of Israel committed themselves to this special relationship with Yahweh. However, future generations would learn how their ancestors, within mere weeks, broke some of the covenant's most basic commands by fashioning a golden calf. But at that moment of failure, God more fully revealed His character. Who is the Lord? He is a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin. This revelation would become a rock to which the people returned repeatedly. Whenever future generations imitated the first generation in turning from God's commands, God's perfect justice and His abundant mercy remained steadfast. Despite their repeated failures, God did not give up on the Exodus generation. Rather, God commanded Moses to build a tabernacle. The tabernacle was the forerunner of Solomon's temple built centuries later. It was constructed precisely according to God's pattern as a movable tent, and a sacred space for Yahweh to dwell without His holiness consuming them. Who is the Lord? He is the Lord who dwells in the midst of His people. The book of Exodus was written not for a single generation, but for all God's people throughout history. Each new generation of Israelites was taught to embrace the Exodus narrative as their own story, not as distant historical events. When later prophets called wayward Israelites back to faithfulness, they would repeatedly remind them of God's words in Exodus. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt. When Israelite parents taught their children the covenant law, they were instructed to begin by first remembering, we were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord brought us out with a mighty hand. Who is the Lord that He should be obeyed? The God who freed His people from slavery in order to dwell with them is the same God we serve today. When Jesus followers read Exodus, we are not simply reading about an ancient liberation from back-breaking slavery. We recognize our own story. We were once enslaved to sin, unable to free ourselves. But through Christ, our Passover lamb, we were delivered from bondage and brought into new life. Just as God inscribed the law on stone tablets in His covenant with ancient Israel, He has now written His law on our hearts. And, as He once dwelled among His people in the tabernacle, He now dwells within us through His Spirit. When we begin to see ourselves in this redemption story, we experience the liberation of the Exodus effect.
If you found this video helpful, please do like and subscribe, as it allows us to reach more people. Our videos are made possible by donations from viewers like you. If you would like to donate, please do follow the link in the description below. And thank you so much for watching.